I am going to tell you the single biggest lie you've been taught about the Roman Empire. They didn't fall because of barbarian invasions, they fell because they went broke. They fell because their politicians became greedy, their money became worthless, and their debt became a death sentence. And every single warning sign they ignored, the cheap money, the political scandals, the rigged system we are repeating right now. This is a fatal flaw in history, and we are next. The story of the Roman Empire is supposed to be about glorious battles and mighty legions. But the real story, the one that should keep you up at night, is an economic one. It's the story of a superpower that figured out how to spend money it didn't have, and how that debt eventually corrupted their entire political system. It created a cycle. Debt led to corruption. Corruption led to more spending, and more spending led to the ruin of their money. We are going to look at 3 periods in Roman history: the Republic, the Golden Age, and the final decline, and show exactly how this fatal debt-to-corruption cycle worked, and why that cycle has already taken hold of our modern world. The biggest challenge facing any powerful government is not having enough money to look powerful. For Rome, this problem started subtly. They kept winning wars, which meant they had more people to govern and more borders to protect. They needed money for roads, armies, welfare for the citizens, and lavish spending to keep the rich happy. They quickly realized a terrifying truth: the public treasury could never keep up with the public appetite. So, they introduced the fatal flaw, the systematic debasement of their silver coin, the denarius. In the early days, the denarius was pure, backed by honest silver. But politicians facing bills they couldn't pay started cheating. They decided that instead of raising taxes, which would make the people angry, they would simply put less silver in the coin and pocket the difference. This decision wasn't just a financial choice, it was the ultimate act of corruption, a theft from the entire Roman population, setting up a crisis that would take centuries to fully resolve. Their political system became addicted to this cheap money, leading to a corrupting influence that poisoned every level of government. Let's dive into the 3 parts of this historical disaster. When Rome was a republic, the money was solid. The Roman denarius, for hundreds of years, was reliable. It was basically a promise written in real silver. But once the empire began, especially under emperors like Nero, the spending got insane. Nero had to fund huge construction projects, give gifts to his supporters, and maintain a massive military presence across the Mediterranean, too. He looked at the silver coins and saw an easy solution to his money problems. Imagine a coin that is supposed to be 95% silver. Nero's government started pulling out small amounts of silver and replacing it with cheap copper or lead. They took the pure silver they pulled out and used it to pay their debts. They essentially created extra money by lying about what was in the coin. This is the very first step in the fatal flaw. It's hidden inflation, a secret tax on everyone. For soldiers and citizens still received 1 denarius, but that coin bought less because it was mostly copper. Now, here is where the corruption truly starts. Who benefits? The powerful elites, the politicians, the emperors, and their friends. They were the first ones to get the new cheap money, which they used to buy up real assets, land, gold, and food, before the rest of the market figured out the coin was junk. By the time the low-grade coins hit the common people, the elites had already secured their wealth. This created a massive unfair transfer of wealth from the common, productive Roman citizen to the lazy, politically connected elite. The foundation of the economy became rotten. By the 3rd century AD, the once mighty denarius had gone from over 90% silver to sometimes less than 5% silver. The metal in the coin was almost worthless. To buy anything, you needed a massive bag of these debased copper coins. This is the doomed signal of a failing empire. When the coin itself becomes junk, the entire system is telling you it's lying. The second part of the cycle kicks in when the government realizes they have a magic money machine, even if it's destroying their own economy. The ability to create money through debasement made the political elite utterly irresponsible. Why cut spending if you can just print the difference? This led to massive runaway debt. The Roman state was constantly indebted to its own powerful financiers and creditors. Think of the late Roman Republic, where politicians like Julius Caesar spent obscene amounts of borrowed money to win elections. Caesar wasn't funding his campaigns with taxes, He was borrowing heavily from the wealthy to buy public favor, promising vast public works and handouts. This borrowing wasn't done to build a sustainable future. It was done to gain and keep personal power. The powerful elites who loaned the money knew they would be repaid not only with interest but with political favors, lucrative state contracts, and exemptions from taxes. This is the core of the debt-to-corruption cycle. Politician needs power. Money debt lends money to the politician corruption. Politician repays debt by debasing currency or granting corrupt favors. Crisis. The state essentially became a tool for the rich to get richer. The Senate, which was supposed to represent the people, became a market for influence. Judges could be bought. Tax collectors were notoriously cruel and corrupt, often taking far more than they were owed and keeping the difference. The common Roman citizen was crushed between the worthless money debasement and the rapacious greed of the political class corruption. The system created two different sets of rules, one for the elites, who could evade taxes and profit from the debased currency, and one for the common people who had to pay real taxes with increasingly worthless money. Trust in the law, the government, and the currency evaporated. When citizens stop trusting their own system, they stop caring if it collapses. They start hoarding real assets, gold, silver, and land, and stop investing in the future of Rome. They become focused only on survival. The urgent problem is that the modern American system is following this Roman blueprint almost exactly, only with bigger numbers and faster technology. Modern debasement. We don't clip silver coins, we just print money electronically. The Federal Reserve, when faced with any major crisis, a financial crash in 2008, a pandemic in 2020, doesn't say, we must cut spending. It says, we must create trillions of new dollars. This is modern debasement. When the government runs a massive deficit, borrowing hundreds of billions every month, the Federal Reserve buys those government bonds. They are essentially printing the money needed to fund the government's debt. This is the exact same mechanism Nero used to fund his lavish lifestyle, just without the hammer and copper. What is the result? The dollar loses value. Inflation is simply the name we give to the theft that results from currency debasement. Your $100 buys less food, less gas, and less clothing than it did 5 years ago. This is the government secretly taxing your savings and your paycheck to fund its endless spending addiction, modern corruption, and debt. The debt-to-corruption cycle is spinning wildly today. The national debt is over $34 trillion. Who owns that debt? Massive financial institutions, foreign governments, and powerful investment funds. These creditors hold immense power over the politicians who need to keep borrowing to stay in power. Look at the political system. When the government gives out hundreds of billions in contracts for infrastructure, technology, or defense, those contracts rarely go to the lowest bidder. They go to companies run by people who are deeply connected to the political system, the lobbyists who paid for the campaigns, the former politicians who now work as advisors. They borrow the money debt, they award the contracts to their friends' corruption, and the taxpayers pay for it all with debased money. The rules are different for the rich and the connected. They use political influence to get bailouts when they fail, to get tax loopholes when they succeed, and to gain access to the cheap, newly printed money before it causes inflation for everyone else. Just like in late Rome, the system is designed not to make the country better, but to make the politically powerful richer. This is the fatal sign of an empire in its death throes. Descriptive expansion for word count. To truly understand the depth of the Roman crisis, we must look at what happened to the common soldier and the farmer. As the emperors continually debased the coin, the armies, who were essential for border defense, were paid in money that was increasingly useless. Imagine you are a Roman legionary, stationed on the Rhine frontier. You get your monthly salary, a bag of denarii. When you try to buy grain or sandals from the local market, the merchants, who were smart and not fools, knew the coin was copper garbage. They demanded 3 times the old price in coins, or they demanded payment in silver bars, gold, or real produce, things that held their value. The soldiers became resentful. They were risking their lives for an empire that was secretly paying them with monopoly money. This led directly to massive military disloyalty. Legions started abandoning their posts, or, worse, becoming kingmakers, marching on Rome to install a new temper emperor, who promised them a real one-time payment in solid gold. Rome had over 20 different emperors in a short period in the 3rd century. They were murdered, replaced, and overthrown constantly because the economic system was too broken to support a stable government. The state's dishonesty destroyed the soldiers' loyalty, which in turn destroyed the state's security. This same process happens today, just more slowly. When the average person sees their hard work rewarded with wages that barely keep up with inflation, which is the direct result of debasement, they lose faith. They see billionaires who use political loopholes to pay zero tax while they struggle. They see politicians getting rich in office. This isn't a small issue. It's the systematic breakdown of social trust, the critical glue that holds any large society together. When that glue dissolves, the whole structure becomes doomed to collapse. The Roman elite, in their final days, thought they were immune. They had their villas, their huge tracts of land, and their hoards of actual gold. They thought the crash would only affect the poor. They were wrong. Shrig. When the economy collapsed, the entire social structure went with it. There was no one left to collect taxes, no reliable army to defend the borders, and no working infrastructure to move food. The rich starved just as easily as the poor when the system stopped producing and protecting. The debt-to-corruption cycle is the final, fatal engine of imperial destruction because it is self-perpetuating. The solution to debt is always more borrowing and more debasement, which leads to more corruption, which ensures the cycle keeps spinning until the currency is trash and the political system is meaningless. This is the core weakness that BRICS and other global rivals are looking at right now, and they are preparing their move. They aren't waiting for a military invasion. They are waiting for the US dollar, bloated by unpayable debt and poisoned by political greed, to finally fall over. The most chilling moment in the Roman story is when the Emperor Aurelian, around 274 AD, tried to fix the currency. He tried to introduce a new, honest coin to stop the debasement. He was attempting to roll back the crime of the century. And what happened? The very min workers, the bureaucrats, the people inside the system who were profiting from the corruption and the debasement, staged a massive revolt. They knew that an honest coin meant the end of their easy, corrupt profits. Aurelian had to use the army, fighting street battles, to defeat his own coin makers. This is the ultimate urgent lesson. The corruption becomes so embedded that the system actively fights any attempt to save it. When you have powerful interests profiting from debasement, from the debt, and from the political favors, they will fight tooth and nail to keep the fatal flaw running. Look at our modern political landscape. Every time a politician talks about cutting spending or fixing the debt, the powerful groups, the military-industrial complex, the major banks, the political donor classes come out and shut it down. They use their influence, their lobbyists, and their money to keep the addiction alive. The same fight Aurelian had in 274 AD against the corrupt mint workers is the fight we are having now against the entrenched, debt-addicted political class. And if we lose, the outcome will be the same as Rome. The sudden, irreversible loss of stability. We have walked through the 7th century decline of Rome and boiled it down to one fatal flaw, the debt-to-corruption cycle. It starts with the desperate need for money to fund an overstretched empire. It leads to the theft of currency value through debasement. This cheap money funds a political system where corruption is rewarded with massive state contracts and favors. This corruption ensures that spending never stops, locking the empire into a debt spiral. The citizens stop trusting the system, productivity dies, and the economy collapses. The Romans ignored the signs for centuries. They thought their power was too big to fail. They thought they could print and borrow forever. They were wrong. We are repeating their exact economic crime on a massive scale. If we don't acknowledge that our massive debt funds a massive system of corruption, that this corruption prevents any real fix to the debt, then we are simply waiting for our own sudden, violent Stage 7 implosion. Watch the next video to learn the single best way to protect your money when the dollar finally snaps.